Khaby Lame's shocking visit to his own restaurant. What happened when he heard a server crying will leave you speechless. You won't believe what happened the moment Khaby Lame walked into his own restaurant. It was supposed to be just another visit. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? But what he walked into changed everything. There in the corner of the bustling restaurant was a server. And she wasn't just serving food. She was crying, like full-on breaking down. And you're probably thinking, okay, people cry all the time, no big deal, but trust me, this wasn't your average meltdown. No, what happened next? It's something nobody could have predicted. Imagine the scene. Busy kitchen lights flickering overhead. The sound of plates clinking, chatter filling the air. But it's her sobs that cut through all that noise. And Khaby? He froze. The whole place did. But here's the thing. This moment wasn't just some random emotional breakdown. It was the beginning of something huge. A moment that would have a ripple effect. Not just on her, but on the entire team, the restaurant, and even Khaby himself. You might think you've seen it all. But trust me when I say, the truth behind what happened next? It's so messed up it'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about fame, business, and the real cost of success. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear, it'll leave you speechless. And if you thought Khaby was just a funny guy making viral videos, you have no idea how deep the story goes. Khaby Lame, the guy who made the world laugh with his no-nonsense, straightforward way of showing how to do simple tasks the right way. He's more than just a viral sensation. He's a symbol of simplicity in an overly complicated world. But behind that viral smile and quiet demeanor is a man who's built his empire from scratch. And like most success stories, it's a lot more complicated than it seems. Now, Khaby had always dreamed of being more than just a content creator. He'd often said in interviews that he wanted to build something lasting, something that would leave a legacy. That's when he decided to open up his restaurant, a cozy Italian spot in the heart of the city. He wasn't trying to break the internet with it. He just wanted to create a space where people could come, sit down, and have a good meal. A space that felt like home. But as we all know, it's never that simple. The restaurant opened with a bang. The first few months were a whirlwind. Lines wrapped around the block. People were coming in just to catch a glimpse of the social media star who had given them so many laughs. But soon the glamour of being a celebrity-owned business wore off. Reality set in. Employees, who were initially thrilled to be working in a place owned by someone so famous, started to feel the weight of the job. The smiles didn't come as easily anymore. People had seen Khaby's goofy skits on Instagram, but behind the kitchen doors it was a different story. It wasn't just about the food, it was about the pressure to keep up appearances. And then there was the server. A young woman no older than 22, who had been working at the restaurant since day one. Her name was Jasmine and she was tough. Had that no-nonsense vibe about her that you could tell just by looking at her. But even tough people break. And over the past few weeks, Jasmine had been struggling with more than just the long shifts and the constant rush of customers. It was something deeper, something that started to seep into the atmosphere of the restaurant. You could sense the tension, like there was something unspoken hanging in the air. Jasmine had grown up in the city, had always been proud of her roots. But she wasn't blind to what was happening around her. She knew the restaurant wasn't just about great food and Khaby's fame. It was about status, about who was in and who wasn't. And lately, it felt like she was being pushed to the margin. See, the thing about working in a celebrity-owned restaurant is that it's not all glitz and glamour. There's this weird undercurrent where some of the employees, mainly the ones from minority backgrounds, felt like they were invisible, like they were there to make the place look good, but not really part of the inner circle. Jasmine was one of them. Her shift hours were long, her tips often got shorted, and the customers, mostly affluent, mostly white, didn't always make her feel welcome. And it wasn't just the customers, it was some of her co-workers too. People who were all too eager to show their admiration for Khaby while subtly treating her like she didn't belong. The subtle comments, the little microaggressions, stuff like, "Oh, you're so good with people for someone like you," or "I didn't know you could speak so well." Jasmine had been brushing it off, but over time, it started to wear on her. She wasn't the type to make waves, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was also Khaby's own struggle. Despite the fame and fortune, he found himself increasingly distant from the day-to-day operations of his restaurant. Sure, he had the name, the brand recognition, and all the attention. But the grind of running a business? That was a different beast. Khaby had always been more of an artist than a businessman, and he'd left the management to others. But now his name was on the line and the cracks were starting to show. He'd walk into the restaurant, see all the smiling faces, the food flying out of the kitchen, but there was always this undercurrent of tension he couldn't ignore. He'd hear whispers from the staff, see how some of them would exchange glances when they thought he wasn't paying attention. It didn't take a genius to figure out that things weren't as perfect as they seemed, but Khaby wasn't blind. He knew what it was like to be looked down on. Growing up in Senegal, he'd dealt with his fair share of racism and prejudice, and even though his success had elevated him to a different level, he couldn't forget where he came from. So when he started to notice little things, like Jasmine's tired eyes or the way she'd flinch when certain customers came in, he started to feel a pull. Something didn't sit right. But as with all things in life, he couldn't ignore it forever. And then one fateful night, it all came to a head. It was another busy Saturday night at Khaby's restaurant. The lights above the tables flickered to the beat of the low hum of conversation. The clattering of dishes, the faint sizzle of food on the grill, the smell of fresh basil and garlic. It was the kind of ambiance that promised comfort, a little slice of Italian paradise right in the heart of the city. But under all that, something darker was brewing, something that no one could ignore much longer. Jasmine had been working the floor for nearly 5 hours straight. She'd just taken another deep breath before heading to the next table when she heard it, loud and clear like a slap to the face. "Hey, you're not from here, are you? Where's your accent from?" "I'm guessing, the Middle East?" A customer, probably in his mid-50s with a wine glass in one hand and an overconfidence that seemed to seep from every pore, was staring at her like she was an alien. Jasmine's stomach churned. The word stung, but she'd heard worse before, so she gave him her practiced smile, the one she'd learned to perfect over the years. "I'm from the city," she said, keeping it short and sweet. The man didn't take the hint. "Really, I thought you'd be from somewhere fancier. You know, like real Italy. Maybe you're just here for the authentic experience, huh?" He chuckled to himself like he'd just cracked a joke, but Jasmine's blood was starting to boil. She took a step back, trying to keep the mask in place. "That's the beauty of this place, sir. A bit of Italy in every bite," she replied, all professionalism, all while biting her tongue. But then, just as she was about to walk away, another voice cut in. "Does she even know what she's talking about?" This came from a woman at the table next to him, a regular. She was sitting there, sipping her wine, completely unaware that her words were carrying the weight of centuries of prejudice. "I mean, it's hard to trust a place when your server looks like she doesn't belong, you know? I bet they just hired her 'cause she's exotic." Jasmine's heart sank. Her stomach twisted in a knot. She turned around, refusing to let them see the tears welling up in her eyes. She had to walk away, had to get out of there. But it wasn't just one customer. It was the constant barrage of microaggressions. The awkward stares, the comments they thought were compliments. "Wow, you speak so well for someone like you. I didn't think you were that pretty. I guess we were wrong." Each one was like a small dagger. Some would say she was being oversensitive, but she knew better. She'd seen it all too many times. And when she got to the back of the house, trying to breathe through the frustration, she couldn't help but hear the gossip from some of the other staff. "They're making a mess out there again, huh?" One of the waiters, a guy named Mark, said, shaking his head. "She should just deal with it." She knew what she signed up for. "You can't come work for Khaby and expect to be treated like the rest of us." Mark wasn't wrong. The rest of us were the ones who looked like they belonged in this world. White, fluent in the local culture, easy to blend in. Jasmine, on the other hand, was different. Her dark skin, her heritage, and the way she carried herself set her apart from the rest of the staff. It wasn't like she hadn't tried to fit in. She worked twice as hard to get the same recognition, to get the same tips, but she'd hit a ceiling. She was stuck in the token role, that subtle, unspoken place where they wanted her just enough to add flavor to the staff, but never enough to make her an equal. Meanwhile, Khaby was busy with his own struggles. The restaurant was his dream, sure, but it was also becoming a nightmare. He couldn't be everywhere at once. Every day it felt like more and more problems were cropping up. His business manager, Olivia, was constantly in his ear about this issue or that customer complaint. And then there was the staff. He could see them looking at him sideways when he'd walk into the kitchen. They weren't sure if they wanted him to be the funny, easygoing guy they saw on Instagram, or if they wanted him to take charge like a real business owner. It was this weird, uncomfortable in-between place that no one seemed to have the answers for. And on top of all that, there was this strange tension that kept hanging in the air. Khaby couldn't put his finger on it, but it was always there. The conversations would stop when he walked in. The laughter would fade. He'd ask his team if everything was okay, and they'd assure him it was, but there was an underlying feeling that something wasn't right. And deep down he knew it had to do with the staff, especially Jasmine. He'd heard her name whispered more than once in hushed tones, and the way she seemed to avoid him whenever he came in, that wasn't just coincidence. One night after a particularly busy dinner rush, Khaby couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The staff was more tense than usual. He'd walked into the kitchen just in time to see Jasmine slip out the back door. No one said anything. The silence was almost louder than any words could have been. He knew then that something was going on, something he hadn't seen yet, but he was about to. The restaurant was his responsibility. His name was attached to every plate served, every customer interaction, every moment. But he wasn't there every moment. And in his absence, things had begun to fracture. The atmosphere wasn't the same. The smiles had started to fade. It wasn't just the food that was getting cold. It was the spirit of the place. Jasmine, for her part, was beginning to crack under the pressure. Every day she found herself swallowing the same resentment. The whispers, the stares, the feeling of never truly being seen for who she was. She thought about leaving. It'd be easy. Go somewhere else, maybe even take a step out of the city for a while. But it wasn't that simple. She didn't just want to run away, she wanted to fix things. But how could she when every time she spoke up, it felt like the problem just got bigger, foreshadowing. The tension between Khaby and his staff, especially Jasmine, has been building up, and we can feel it getting close to boiling over. Jasmine's discomfort is growing, and Khaby is sensing the change in the atmosphere of his restaurant. But even with the cracks appearing, Khaby hasn't yet realized the full scope of what's happening under his nose. It's only a matter of time before something explodes. And when it does, it's going to change everything. It didn't take long for the storm to hit. The breaking point came one evening just after the dinner rush, when Jasmine had been working non-stop for hours. She was running back and forth between tables, her legs aching, her mind frazzled. That's when she felt it again. A wave of exhaustion and frustration like an anchor pulling her under. The comments, the stares, the feeling that she was invisible yet always under a microscope, it all came crashing down. She could feel her body shaking, her heart racing. Jasmine had always been strong, but tonight was different. Tonight she couldn't keep the tears back any longer. As she passed through the kitchen, her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. She ducked behind the door just out of sight from the customers, and that's when it happened. She broke. The tears started streaming down her face, and she didn't even try to stop them. The hurt that had been building for months poured out in that moment, and all she could do was stand there, fighting the urge to scream, to tell the world how much she was hurting. But she didn't get the chance to hide. Khaby, who had been in the back office trying to put out another fire, there were always fires to put out, heard the sniffles. He'd never heard Jasmine cry. He'd never seen her weak. He knew something was wrong, but this was something different, something real. He walked over, his sneakers barely making a sound on the floor. He didn't know what to say. He stood there, awkward for a moment, watching Jasmine struggle to keep herself together. He could tell it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't a bad day. It was everything, the hurt, the microaggressions, the feeling of being treated as less than, the burden of always having to smile through the pain. "Jasmine," he said, his voice soft but firm. "What's going on? Talk to me." Jasmine wiped her eyes, shaking her head. "It's nothing, Khaby, just tired." "Don't worry about it," but Khaby knew better. "No, I'm worried. This isn't just about being tired, is it?" She couldn't hold it in anymore. "It's everything, Khaby. It's the way I'm treated here. It's the way people look at me like I'm invisible. Like I'm only here to fill a quota or look good in a picture. It's the way I work my ass off, and then some customer tells me, 'Wow, you're different for someone like you.' Or they say, 'I didn't think you'd be so nice.' It's the little things, Khaby, the constant things. And I'm so damn tired of it." Khaby stood there, frozen for a moment. The weight of her words hit him like a ton of bricks. He'd always been so focused on his own success, his own image, that he hadn't seen what was right in front of him. He hadn't seen the way his restaurant had become a microcosm of the very thing he fought against: systemic inequality. He'd thought his fame was enough. He'd thought his presence in the restaurant would shield his employees, protect them from the subtle racism and classism that bled through the cracks of the industry. But Jasmine had been living it day in and day out. And she was right. It wasn't just one thing. It was everything. "I had no idea," Khaby murmured, his voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know it was this bad." Jasmine let out a bitter laugh. "How could you? You're Khaby Lame. You're a global icon. People adore you. But the rest of us? We're just here to make the place look good. You're too busy to see the way they treat us. And even when you're here, I can see it. There's this distance. You're not really one of us. You're not even really here half the time." The words cut deep. Khaby could feel his chest tighten. He wanted to say something to make it better, but what could he say? He couldn't undo the years of mistreatment, the years of silence. The worst part was he hadn't even realized how bad it was until Jasmine had spilled it all out. He stepped closer to her, his voice steady but heavy with regret. "I'm sorry. I should have noticed. I've been so caught up in the business, in the brand, that I failed to see what was happening to you and the others. And I'm sorry for that. You deserve better." Jasmine didn't know what to say. She just stood there, her shoulders shaking, her emotions on edge. She'd always thought of Khaby as a friend, someone who understood her. But in that moment he felt like a stranger. A well-meaning stranger, sure, but still a stranger. She wasn't sure if his apology was enough. Words had never been enough. The tension in the restaurant had started to unravel. Word had gotten out about what happened between Khaby and Jasmine. Some of the staff were talking, others were staying silent. The customers who had witnessed the scene, some of them were uncomfortable, some of them were embarrassed, and some of them were downright angry. But the most significant thing was the shift in the atmosphere. The walls that had been slowly closing in on Jasmine, the unspoken truths, the lies, the layers of unacknowledged racism, had finally been exposed. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every single person in the restaurant who had ever felt invisible, who had ever felt less than Khaby had a decision to make. Would he take responsibility for what had happened under his roof? Or would he continue to bury his head in the sand and let it happen again? Foreshadowing. The consequences of Khaby's inaction are coming home to roost, and the tension is far from over. Jasmine has laid bare the truth, but now Khaby must face the harsh reality of his own ignorance. The community, the staff, and the customers are all watching. The weight of the moment has shifted, and it's up to Khaby to decide how he'll respond. But as the dust begins to settle, one thing is clear. Things will never be the same again. The real work is just beginning. The night was far from over, but it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. Khaby had spent the past hour pacing around, trying to figure out what to do, how to make things right. He couldn't shake the image of Jasmine's tear-streaked face, the raw emotion in her voice. It haunted him. No matter how much he tried to focus on the stacks of paperwork in front of him, it all came back to her. The restaurant, which had once been a sanctuary for his dreams, now felt like a prison. He'd always been able to control everything, his brand, his content, his image. But this was bigger than him. This was a system he couldn't simply smile his way out of. Jasmine had left early that night, her shift cut short, as if to escape the suffocating weight of the truth that hung in the air. She didn't even look back as she left through the back door, her shoulders slumped with the weight of something Khaby couldn't even begin to comprehend. The door swung open, breaking Khaby's train of thought. Mark, the waiter from earlier, walked in, a smug grin plastered on his face. Khaby's stomach churned. He could feel something was off, like a tension he couldn't place. The words Mark had said earlier echoed in his mind. She should just deal with it. She knew what she signed up for. "Yo, Khaby, you good?" Mark asked, his voice all casual, like nothing had happened. Khaby could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "No, Mark, I'm not good. Not by a long shot. You think this is all just fine?" His voice was low, barely above a whisper, but there was an edge to it now, something dangerous. "You heard Jasmine, right? You know what's going on here." Mark shifted uncomfortably but didn't back down. "Yeah, I heard, so what?" "She's just upset, man. We all get like that sometimes." "Doesn't mean we gotta make it a big deal." Khaby's patience snapped. A big deal? A big deal? Mark, you don't get it. She's not upset, she's tired. Tired of being treated like she doesn't belong here. Tired of doing everything right and still getting pushed to the side.
And you?
You don't get to just brush that off like it's no big deal. Mark raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to Khaby speaking like this. You're acting like it's personal, bro. She knew what she was signing up for when she took this job. Everyone does. This is a business, not a charity. Khaby's blood was boiling now. This is not just a business. This is people's lives. This is her life. And I'm done pretending it's all okay. He shoved the papers off the table in frustration, the sound sharp and jarring. You can't just ignore it. You can't just pretend that everything's all right while people suffer in silence.
Do you even hear yourself?
Mark took a step back, clearly uncomfortable with the rising tension. But Khaby was done holding back. He couldn't pretend anymore. He couldn't ignore the signs. Here's the thing, Mark, Khaby continued, his voice trembling with anger and regret. You're sitting here acting like nothing's wrong, but you're part of the problem. Every time you let it slide, every time you let someone say something disgusting and you stay quiet, it gets worse. And you don't even realize it, do you? You don't see the way this whole system is built on people like Jasmine being invisible. You don't see the damage you're doing when you stay silent. Mark was visibly shaken now, his usual cocky demeanor cracking. He stood there, frozen, unsure of what to say. Khaby didn't wait for an answer. He knew it was too late for words now. He stormed out of the office, through the kitchen, and toward the front of the restaurant. His heart was racing. His mind was a whirlwind. He had to find Jasmine. He had to make this right, even if it meant tearing everything down in the process. As he pushed through the back door, the cold night air hit him like a slap. The city was buzzing, the streets alive with energy. But Khaby felt like he was trapped in a storm. The lights from the restaurant behind him flickered, casting long shadows over the pavement. Then he saw her. Jasmine was standing there, leaning against the alley wall, her arms crossed over her chest. She didn't see him at first, but he saw her. She looked so small in that moment, so defeated. The weight of everything she'd been holding in was written all over her face. Her eyes were red, her hair wild, and she was standing there like she was waiting for something to give, for someone to make it all stop. Jasmine, Khaby called out softly, stepping closer. She didn't move, didn't even flinch. But when she spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. What do you want, Khaby? You got what you wanted. You fixed the problem, right? Khaby took another step forward, his voice breaking through the tension. No, I didn't fix anything. But I'm going to Jasmine. I promise you I'm going to fix this. She finally looked at him, her gaze sharp, almost accusatory. Fix it? How are you going to fix it, Khaby? By apologizing? By pretending that everything's okay? You can't just wave a magic wand and make it all better. You don't know what it's like, do you? To be treated like I'm less than, like I'm invisible. You've never had to fight for a seat at the table, Khaby. Not like I have. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, and for a second he couldn't breathe. He wanted to say something, anything that would make her see that he was trying, that he was on her side. But he knew she was right. He hadn't walked in her shoes. He didn't know what it was like to constantly have to prove your worth, to have every small victory feel like a battle. I'm sorry, Khaby said, his voice raw with emotion. I'm so sorry, Jasmine. I should have been there for you. I should have seen what was happening and I didn't. But I swear I'll do better. I'll change this place. We can make it better together. Jasmine shook her head, her eyes hardening. You don't get it, Khaby. It's not just about this restaurant. It's about everything. The whole system is built to keep people like me down. And no matter how much you want to help, you can't fix it all with an apology. It's bigger than that. Khaby took a deep breath, his chest heavy. I know, but I'm going to try. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make things right. I don't care how long it takes or how hard it gets. I owe it to you, Jasmine. I owe it to all of us. For a moment, there was silence. The world seemed to pause, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to shift. Then Jasmine finally looked at him, her eyes softening just a little. Don't promise me things you can't keep, Khaby. Just do better. That's all I want. Do better. Foreshadowing, the confrontation with Jasmine has laid bare the depth of the systemic issues at play. Khaby's emotional turmoil is palpable, and while he's promised to make things right, the weight of what needs to be changed is overwhelming. This moment is just the beginning of a longer, more difficult journey, and the stakes are higher than ever. It wasn't an easy fix. In fact, it wasn't really a fix at all. There was no magical moment where everything just clicked and the world was suddenly a fair and just place. It didn't happen overnight, but the changes started. Small at first, but real. And they mattered. Khaby took action. He sat down with Jasmine and the rest of the staff and for the first time really listened. He didn't just show up to look like he cared. He showed up to actually care. He set up a training program, mandatory, no exceptions, to address unconscious bias, microaggressions, and the importance of diversity in the workplace. They created a safe space for employees to speak out, to share their experiences without fear of retaliation or being ignored. And Khaby, well, he did more than just talk. He used his platform to amplify voices that had been silenced for far too long, from his own staff to the community at large. But, as Jasmine had said, this wasn't just about the restaurant. It was about a culture, about a system that had been built over centuries to leave people like her behind. And while Khaby's restaurant couldn't change the entire system, it became a small part of a larger conversation. The impact of that night didn't just affect the people inside the restaurant. It affected everyone who watched, who listened, and who chose to engage in the uncomfortable truth about racism and inequality. Jasmine, though, was still figuring it out. She'd returned to work a week after that emotional confrontation, but she wasn't the same. She didn't let the comments slide anymore. She didn't let people brush her off. Her voice was stronger now, clearer, and Khaby, well, he didn't just apologize. He backed it up with action. She saw that. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like someone cared, but it wasn't just about Jasmine. It was about the people who saw what happened and realized that they too had a part to play. The customers who had been in the restaurant that night, the ones who had witnessed the tension, the discomfort, the pain, began to speak up. They started to ask questions, to reflect on their own biases. They became part of the conversation. It wasn't just Khaby and Jasmine anymore. It was a movement, however small, that rippled through the community. The world was changing, but it wasn't changing fast enough. There were still so many Jasmines out there, people who were forced to smile through the pain, to swallow their hurt for the sake of making others comfortable. The system wasn't going to change overnight, but the more people stood up, the more people listened, the more it would begin to shift. In the end, it wasn't the grand gestures that mattered the most. It was the small, consistent acts of resistance, the times when people like Jasmine spoke up, the times when Khaby refused to let silence be the solution. It was about breaking the cycle of inaction, about finally taking a stand and saying, enough. The question now was, would people continue the fight, or would they slip back into complacency? Would they let the uncomfortable truths fade away? Or would they carry the torch for those who had been silenced for so long? Khaby knew that he couldn't change everything, but he could be the one to start the conversation. He could use his platform to push for something better, something more just. And maybe, just maybe, he could inspire others to do the same. Call to action. What's it going to take for real change? How many more people have to suffer before we open our eyes and do something about it? The time for silence is over. The time for action is now. Will you speak up, or will you remain quiet while others are left to fight alone? The choice is yours. Reflection. In the end, this story isn't just about Khaby or Jasmine or even the restaurant. It's about the way systems of power and prejudice work in the background, affecting the lives of real people. It's about the importance of listening, of recognizing injustice, and of using our voices to create a better world. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play. But the question remains, will we take that role, or will we stay silent?